We'll read down to verse 12. Revelation 22:10 says, "And he saith unto me, Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be." The time in which the righteous and the filthy remain in their fixed spiritual condition is during the day of judgment on the world, okay, when God has shut the door to salvation. This is the time when Christ is coming in his glory with his holy angels, or with his saints. Okay, this is also the time when the elect are being made manifest before the judgment seat of Christ. And again, this is taking place here on earth, not in heaven. Okay, now let's take a look at Matthew chapter 24, which is going to give us more specific details regarding the timing of Christ's coming in his glory with the saints. It'll be Matthew 24:29. We'll read down to verse 31. Matthew 24, verse 29. There we read, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. And the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign." Okay, this is not the reality, but the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. "And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." Okay, here we have further confirmation that the time when Christ appears in his glory is immediately after the great tribulation period, okay, which is the time of judgment. And it's also the time when his saints appear or are made manifest. Okay, now let's take a look at a passage that's also very similar to that of Colossians 3, which also focuses on Christ coming in glory with and the saints with him. It's in Matthew 25, verse 31. Matthew 25, we'll read 25:31, we'll read down to verse 34. There we read, "When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory." And to sit is to rule. Okay, and that's what Christ is doing during the day of judgment. He is ruling with a rod of iron. "And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Okay, so there isn't any doubt that when the Bible speaks about Christ coming in his glory and the saints with him, that it's a reference to Judgment Day, or to our day. Okay, let's take a look at one last passage before we go back to Colossians 3. Let's take a look at 1 Peter chapter 5. I want to read the first 4 verses. 1 Peter chapter 5. There we read, "The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God." And another way to say this would be, "Feed my sheep," okay, "which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not for filthy lucre, but of a ready mind. Neither as lords over God's heritage, but being examples of the flock. When the chief shepherd shall appear, ye shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away." Okay, and the elect, of course, are partakers of the glory of God during the judgment process, and they're commanded to declare all that God has revealed unto them from his word. Okay, all right, let's turn back to Colossians chapter 3. I want to continue with verse 5. Colossians 3, we're going to read verses 5 to 7. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth: fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. For which things' sake the wrath of God cometh on the children of disobedience, in the which ye also walked some time when ye lived in them. So the command that we read in verse 2, to set our affection on things above, not on things on the earth, is also explained here in verse 5. Okay, and to not set our affection on the things on the earth really is to mortify or to put to death the desires of the flesh. Okay, and then God goes on to list 5 sins here: fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Okay, but why is God listing 5 sins here? Okay, what does the number 5 point to? Okay, it can point to salvation or to judgment, depending on the context, right? Okay, remember the parable of the wise and foolish virgins? How many were wise and how many were foolish? 5. Okay, and so here in Colossians 3:5, God is listing 5 sins to teach us that all those who are still in their sins will enter into God's judgment and be condemned. Okay, it doesn't matter if they trusted, that they accepted Christ once upon a time for their salvation, and then went back to live the way that pleases the flesh, and think that, okay, my salvation is secure. No, God doesn't work that way. Okay, He likens these people to children of disobedience. Okay, not to children of God. Verse 6 confirms this by telling us that these people have no desire to put to death the desires of the flesh and are under the wrath of God. Let's read it once more. Verse 6. For which things' sake the wrath of God cometh, or is coming, because this word is actually in a future tense. For which things' sake the wrath of God is coming on the children of disobedience. And of course, from our vantage point today, it would be in the present tense. The wrath of God has come. Okay, in other words, verse 6 is focusing on all those who are going to enter into God's judgment as children of disobedience. Okay, and in our case, all those who have entered are the children of disobedience. Okay, they've already entered into God's judgment. Then verses 7 to 10 tell us that the true believers, even though their sins were paid for at the point of the world's foundation, they live the same way as the children of disobedience did, and walking after the desires of the flesh before salvation. Okay, but after salvation, all that changed. Okay, we read in verse 7, in the which ye also walked some time when ye lived in them, but now ye also put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Lie not to one another, seeing that ye have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. So in verse 8, we see that God lists 5 additional sins which were put off by the true believers. Okay, and because God is using here a conjunction, He's using the word also, it means that He's including the first 5 sins that were listed in verse 5. So what is God teaching us here? That the elect have put off 10 specific sins? No, but in listing 10 sins, God is teaching us that because of the work of Christ, the elect have put off the completeness of their sins, and they are no longer to walk in the flesh. Okay, now if we turn to the book of Ephesians, we can see a passage that's also very similar to that of Colossians 3. Let's take a look at Ephesians 2. I want to read the first 5 verses. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 1. And you hath He quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sins, wherein in times past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So we can see that the children of disobedience are those who were under the authority of Satan and are under the bondage of sin. Let's continue reading. Among whom also we all had our conversation in times past, in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, for His great love, wherewith He loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved. Okay, let's take a look at another passage, Ephesians chapter 5. We'll read the first 8 verses there. There we read, Be ye therefore followers of God, as dear children, and walk in love, as Christ hath also loved us, and hath given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling savor. But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not once be named among you as becometh saints, neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not convenient, but rather giving of thanks. For this we know, that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater, hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no man deceive you with vain words, because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the children of disobedience. Be not ye therefore partakers with them. For ye were sometimes darkness, but now ye are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. Okay, now these two passages we just read are teaching us the same thing we learned in Colossians. Okay, to set our affection on things above is to walk in love, or to walk in obedience to the commandments of God, because we've been made alive. Okay, and because we've been made alive, we're to no longer walk after the course of this world, fulfilling the desires of our flesh, as we did prior to God saving us. Okay, I'm going to stop here and I'll close with a word of prayer.